Another important document for the beginning for American history is, of course, the Bill of Rights. So some of your important ones, most of you will probably remember the First Amendment, which talks about freedom of religion, freedom of speech, of the press, which, by the way, includes the internet, freedom to assemble, to petition, or complain to the government. So those are your big First Amendment rights. Second Amendment, which has been really controversial lately, is the idea of being able to keep and bear arms, so being able to have firearms. Amendment 3, which we don't really have to worry about anymore, but this is the idea where you can't be forced to quarter troops in your house. This is a big deal in the American Revolution, so we want to make sure that this was outlined in our Constitution, that during times of peace or in times of war, unless you have a law passed, that you can't force soldiers to stay in people's homes. Article 4 is one that's still very much relevant today, and this is the whole idea of no unreasonable searches or seizures. So you have to have a warrant to search a house, or you have to have certain causes. So this is a big one that we still have to do with. The Fifth Amendment, you've probably heard people say something about pleading the Fifth. This is whenever you don't have to be a witness against yourself. Basically, you're not ratting yourself out whenever they ask you a question and you don't want to answer yes or no. You can just plead the Fifth, and then you're not breaking a law. It also says you can't be tried for the same crime twice. So if somebody goes on trial for murder and they're found not guilty of that murder, they can't go on trial for that same murder again later. The Sixth Amendment is going to be a lot of your rights of the accused. You have the right to a speedy public trial. You have a right to a trial by jury of your peers. So this is one that has, and you have the right to an attorney. So if you've ever watched the TV shows where they're giving their rights and they tell them they have a right to an attorney and they have the right to remain silent, they're talking about rights that were given to them in the Bill of Rights, specifically Amendments 5 and 6. Amendment 8, this is the one that has to do with no cruel or unusual punishment. So we're not going to give somebody the death penalty for stealing a can of tuna from a convenience store, for example, or we're not going to give them a fine of $1 million for stealing that same can of tuna. One of the lesser known amendments, but it can really be very critical, is the 10th Amendment, which says, not every power is delegated in the Constitution, and if it's not prohibited by the states, then it's reserved to the people. So, for example, it doesn't say in the Constitution that you have the right to quit a job, but since it doesn't tell you that you can't, do that, or it doesn't prohibit you, then you have that right. So not every right has to be listed in the Constitution. Another individual that might show up with the American identity is Alexis de Tocqueville, who was somebody that came from France and wanted to come and see, after the French Revolution, why does America do so well as a constitutional republic, and maybe parts of Europe were really struggling with trying to change to a republic. And so he came up with 5 values that he thought led to America's success as a constitutional republic. And these were egalitarianism, which was that there was differences in wealth and power. But there was still equality. There wasn't this social system that, like you see in Europe. Populism, so the idea that the people had the right to participate in the government and vote for who was going to run the government. Liberty, so this was that idea, again, here's those principles in the Constitution: federalism, separation of powers. We had safeguards in place for our individual freedoms. We also had the opportunity to rise through social ranks, and this is probably one of the biggest ones that's different between Europe and America at this time, is that you weren't born into a social class, you had to work your way up. And then the last one that you'll see coming up in future tutorials is laissez-faire. And this is the idea of the government doesn't get involved with the economy. So if the economy starts doing bad, you just kind of let the natural business cycle take place. You don't get involved and start making regulations and trying to control what happens in the economy. And in the 1800s, this was the case, and he felt like that really helped America to be successful as a constitutional republic. Other things that associate with the American identity, we have our motto, which I'm probably going to butcher because I'm not up on my Latin: E pluribus unum, out of many comes one. And this is that whole idea of we're not these United States, we are the United States. We are all one union, whereas in the beginning, everybody felt like they were more loyal to their state than they were to the entire nation. You'll probably see this motto on a lot of your money. Another motto, "In God We Trust." This originates from the Star Spangled Banner. It was made the official motto in 1956, which is during the Cold War, whenever everybody was just afraid of anything communist, and so they wanted to do whatever they could to kind of safeguard from that. And one of the things with communism is they restricted religious freedom, so we wanted to kind of show that we don't restrict religious freedom. And so that led to the "In God We Trust" that you see on all your money and maybe on some buildings and that kind of stuff. So let's look at how this question or this era might be assessed in the EOC. So this question, why did the United States adopt the motto "In God We Trust" in 1956? So when I do this, I want to look for keywords. So now they're asking me about the motto "In God We Trust," and they gave me a year. Well, I know from paying attention in my class, the 1950s was in the height of the Cold War, which was against the Soviet Republic, and it was anti-communism. And so I want to keep that in mind. So when I look at my answer choices, I want to see which one makes sense. And knowing that we're anti-USSR, no communism, and from paying attention in class, I know that there were countries, communist countries, that restricted religious practices. That would lead me to G, distinguishing the nation from countries that restricted religion.